This is Dear Strategy, episode 113. Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product and business strategy. Real questions from real people in real companies, just like yours. Welcome back, strategy creators, to another great episode. This is episode 113, and I apologize up front. It is a little bit late, just a couple of days. I ran a little bit behind. I usually do an episode and a blog and an episode and a blog, somewhere in that neighborhood. But the last couple of weeks I got behind. Business picked up, which is nice, I guess. And so that's what happened. But in any case, this is just a little late, and I apologize for that. In any event, that's not to say that the content isn't worth waiting for, because it certainly is. And today we have another strategy story to tell you. I'm going to keep this story very generic, very general, because there's a specific story that happened, but I don't know that the details of this particular story is as important as the topic that I want to talk about. So let me kind of tell you what's going on. The particular story has to do with a refrigerator. Okay. So I got a refrigerator just about 5 years ago. And the real crux of this is that the refrigerator had a lot more bells and whistles than I needed it to have, right? I just needed a refrigerator. And in fact, this one had a whole bunch of different features and, electronics and things like that were exciting and seemed cool, but definitely nothing that I needed. Okay, though, I'm going to get it and that's fine. Well, fast forward 5 years and I've had nothing but problems with this particular refrigerator. And the problems are mostly with the bells and whistles, right? The thing is freezing and cooling perfectly, which is mainly what I need the refrigerator to do, or needed the refrigerator to do. But what it's not doing perfectly is everything else that it said it would do, right? And most of my problems had to do with the ice maker, or the controls for the ice maker, more appropriately. And the ice maker kept going on and off, and it would work, and sometimes the controls would work, sometimes they wouldn't. So all the kind of electronics that were in the freezer door was where I was having my problems. And I finally got a repair person, and the repair person said, oh yeah, this happens all the time. These refrigerators, they have all kinds of electronics in it, and they have a motherboard in it and all of that. I don't know all the deep details, but this is what he was telling me. And so he, said, well, we can replace the sensors on the ice maker. We could replace the ice maker itself. And then if none of that works, we have to replace the actual processor, the motherboard, I guess he called it, but I don't know if it's really a motherboard, whatever it is, the central processor of the refrigerator, all these high-end electronics that I don't think they had 40 or 50 years ago, but somehow new refrigerators need these things, quote unquote. So in any case, none of that stuff worked. And just before he replaced the motherboard, or was going to replace the motherboard, I said, let me go out on the internet like I normally do and try and figure out what might really be going on here, because no one can seem to figure it out. It turns out that in this particular case, there was a whole bunch of wires that went from the main body of the refrigerator up into the freezer door, where all these electronic devices were, the touch panels and things like that. And those wires broke. And they broke because, there was a lot of them, and there's a bundle of them, and constantly opening and closing the freezer door caused them to break and to fray. And they were not replaceable. So the only option for me was to actually solder them together, repair them, get a brand new freezer door, or get a brand new refrigerator. And I opted for the latter version of that, right? I just went and got a brand new refrigerator. So my refrigerator ended up lasting me 5 years. Now, there's a lot of different problems in this as far as I'm concerned, but the two that I want to really talk to, and I might actually save one of them for a future episode, but the most obvious one is the thing clearly had a design defect of some type. And of course it was out of the warranty, so it wasn't going to be covered. And I had really no choice but to buy a new refrigerator. So there is an underlying question to say, well, if something's out of a warranty or outside of the warranty period and it fails due to a clear design defect, then companies probably should do something to make that right, even though they're under no legal obligation to do that. The consumer expectation of a product lasting is almost always greater than the warranty. So they probably should do something about that, right? And there's a strategic question behind that, because doing that would cost money. So obviously it's a pretty good financial strategy for a company to have a short warranty and a long expectation of life, right? So the consumer is going to pay for a product based on what they think it should last or how long they think it should last, which is often perpetuated by the advertising and promotion, brand reputation, and so forth that the company promotes. But then if they have a warranty that's far shorter than that period, then they don't have to pay out on any problems, right? So financially, that's probably a good strategy. From a brand standpoint, I think it's an awful strategy because, after the product fails, if they don't make it right, I'm going to go buy a different brand. So there's a whole issue there around warranty. And again, we could talk about that, but it's not the main thing that I want to address on this particular program. What I actually want to address is this idea of products that should be built to last, right? That we've kind of been conditioned to know or conditioned to think should last for a long time. But in a modern day world, and in an attempt to differentiate these products, companies are adding all kinds of features, all kinds of bells, all kinds of whistles that we really probably don't need, but that certainly reduce the life of that product to some extent. And I'm mostly talking here about big stuff, right? Like appliances, ovens, stoves, refrigerators, things of that nature, washer dryers, dishwashers. I have example after example in my own house of appliances that when I was growing up were expected to last easily 20 plus years, most times more, sometimes double that. But now those same appliances, the same types of appliances are being built with all kinds of electronics and, features and touchscreens and technologies that would cause them to last around the time that a cell phone would last or a smartphone would last, right? Because the technology is going to be surpassed. And that's in the best case. In the worst case, all those bells and whistles have a lot more components and a lot more parts and a lot more pieces, all of which could be failure points and many times are failure points and cause the product to fail prematurely as well. So in today's world, with all of these new bells and whistles, we have products that are actually made to last a lot less, but our expectation is still that they'll last for a long time. So this is an interesting question for a product manager or for a company, right? Is this a good trend? And I have to say that I think it could be from some standpoint. Right now, we can't talk about this particular subject without talking about this idea of planned obsolescence. Some of you probably heard that term before. There's a long history to it, much longer than probably most of us know. But planned obsolescence is basically when a company builds the idea of becoming obsolete into their product. I'm probably not saying that the best way that I could, but let's give an example. So like a company that has a non-user replaceable battery, right? And an example of this would be your iPhone, for example. So the iPhone, the battery is not replaceable by the user, at least it's not easily replaceable. The battery has a finite life. You can only charge and discharge a battery so many times before it starts to lose its effectiveness and it can't hold a charge anymore. I don't know exactly what that time period is. I think it varies from device to device, battery to battery. But for the most part, you would expect as a consumer that probably that cycling of charging and discharging probably won't go on for much more than 5 years. So that's an example of planned obsolescence, right? The company intentionally made it so that that battery is not replaceable, meaning that they are expecting the device to last only as long as that battery lasts, right? And after that, you got to throw it away. So that's an example of planned obsolescence. Maybe a more common one or more obvious one is computer chips, right? Microprocessors. Anything that relies on a chip for speed, like computers. Now, back when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, certainly in the 90s, we had the chip wars, right? Every year to year and a half, there was a new speed that came out. And you expected that your computer was only going to be good for probably 2, 3, maybe 4 years before the processor would not be fast enough to handle what the latest technology would require it to handle, right? And so that's another example of planned obsolescence. And the whole idea behind it, by the way, is that, products will become obsolete. Now, some people think there's some evil, motivation behind it. Like companies, we want the product to fail, so you'll replace it within 5 years and buy from us. There's probably some of that, definitely. But some of it is literally just because the technologies of parts and pieces just aren't designed to last as long as we might expect them to. And so, those products will eventually become obsolete. So that's the idea. Now, here's the trick. We might expect that from a personal computer. We might expect that from a smartphone. But do we expect that from a high-end appliance that we're paying a lot of money from, or a lot of money for, I should say? Refrigerators, stoves, washer dryers, like I said before, cars. These are all examples of really, really high-end, really expensive products that we expect to last a long time. And by and large, that's why we're paying a lot of money for them, right? And when they don't last a long time, that goes against our expectation, and we as consumers get pissed. And so I think companies have, over the years, in an attempt to try and differentiate their products and add more value, one of the things that I think they may be missing in this is that they're making their products more complex. They're adding more failure points or potential failure points into their products. And those products are simply lasting less time, which means that customers are not happy. And I can name any number of different appliances inside my own house where this has happened. Just about every one of them. In fact, I just had an oven that lasted, I think it was probably about 10 years, maybe 15, before the control panel went dead. I just had a washer dryer. This one has given me problems ever since the start, right? It's got a sensor that senses an imbalance. This is a funny one, right? Because the washer dryer is supposed to be highly efficient, uses less water, everything else, except for the fact that every time I do a wash, about halfway through, the sensor gives me an imbalanced load. All I'm doing is putting clothes in there, right? It's not like I'm loading it up or anything else, but it gives me an imbalanced load, which means I have to start it over again. So I don't know how much less water it's supposed to be using, but I'm doing 1.5 times at least more washes than I normally would, right? Because the sensors, don't work. And I mean, I could go on and on and on. My car, oh my goodness, I bought a car. The first 2 years I had it, and I hate it, by the way. I can't stand it because it's given me nothing but problems. It has the automatic door locks, and they just randomly lock, unlock as I'm driving, just because. I had a problem with this one as a butte. I had a problem with it. There's a sensor that basically, when you're supposed to be in park, it senses that you're in park and then allows you to shut the car off. Well, my sensor wasn't working. So I'd put the car in park and it wouldn't let me shut it off. Literally wouldn't let me shut it off because the sensor thought that the car was still in drive. It was just a sensor that's in the transmission, the shifter, I guess. And so I would literally pull up to a place, put the car in park, go to get out of the car. It literally would not let me shut the car off. I absolutely had to keep the car running while I went in to do what I had to do because the car would not let me shut it off. Of course, I had to go get that repaired and so forth. I mean, again, I could go on and on and on and on and on. And these are products that I'm naming that, my expectation is that they would last 20, 30, 40 years in some cases without many problems. I mean, not without any problem, but certainly not without these types of problems, and certainly not within a couple of years like these products are failing. And so that's kind of what my refrigerator story prompted me to think about. It was, my goodness, none of this would have happened if they didn't try and make the refrigerator something fancy or something that it's not. So, and there's another problem too, by the way. You could say, I know the counter argument would be, well, if you don't want all those fancy bells and whistles, just don't buy those fancy bells and whistles. They have baseline models. And that is true. But here's the problem. The baseline models are all cheapened out, right? So if you don't buy all the extra electronic and technological features, then you're getting the stripped down version, and the stripped down version, the main functionality has been cheapened as well, right? So it uses all lower end components and so forth. And you can go out on the appliance manufacturers' websites. They'll show you this. They'll tell you this, right? So the base models are generally not good quality for the main function you want the thing to do. So that's not a great solution, right? So at the end of the story, what we have is companies that are doing this. Are they doing it for evil reasons? I don't think so necessarily. Maybe some are, maybe some aren't. I don't know. But I think the bigger thing is, in today's day and age, we're building all of this new functionality and new technology into products, and that's causing these products to last less time than they should. And I would tell you that companies really need to rethink this a little bit. So maybe we have baseline products that are built of high quality, but just don't have all the features and benefits, right? So you have the option there. Maybe you have these higher end products, but they have replaceable modules, right? So that, if something fails in a shorter time period than the product should be failing, then you can have some type of replaceable module so that I could update the electronics, but I don't have to update the main product. Or maybe they just have to pay more attention to designing products that really work. Test them thoroughly. Make sure that all the wiring and all the electronics and all the processors are put. I've heard of stories where processors are put in areas that there's high heat, so they fail because there's like all kinds of different things that can happen. But, test your products and make sure that they work. And maybe if you want to keep yourself honest, offer warranties that are longer than 1 year, because that will keep you from putting out crap, right? My point is, and how does this come back to strategy for companies? I think for a company, don't think that consumers are blind to this stuff. We know it and we're mad about it. When a washer dryer doesn't last more than 2-3 years before it starts giving you trouble, we don't like it. And we're probably not going to buy your brand again, right? That's not good for you. It's not like, oh, good, now they're going to go buy a replacement product that's going to be ours. No, it's going to be somebody else's. And that's an issue for you, right? So I would encourage companies to really think about what consumers want, really think about what's important to consumers, and most importantly, match your product's life expectancy to the consumer's expectation. So if you say that it's going to last a certain period of time or imply that it's going to last a certain period of time, make sure that it does. If the consumer expects it's going to last a certain period of time, make sure that it does. Because if you don't do that, I don't care what anybody says, your brand is going to end up getting burned. And that's just not a good trend, no matter how many companies might be doing it. So that's the show this week. Hopefully you got something out of that. Probably a little preachy this week. I don't know. Maybe I'm in a bad mood. Not sure. But but I really think there's something to be learned there. So hopefully if you work for a company and you're thinking about putting your product strategy together, think about these things and maybe you'll have some food for thought. Also, if you have a question that you want to be featured on the show or a story that you want to share, go to dearstrategy.net. You can click on the contact link. It'll take you to a form. You could ask a question, share a story, and maybe we'll feature that on a future episode. Also, don't forget to go to the website of the company that sponsors this program, Strategy Generation Company. That is the company I founded and, of course, that I work for. We offer tools and training, all kinds of great things around this subject of strategy development. So go check us out at strategygeneration.com and look at all the things we have to offer for you there. While you're doing all that, don't forget to make time for the plan. We'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for listening to Dear Strategy with Bob Caporelli. To learn more or to submit a question to be featured on our show, please visit us at dearstrategy.net.